It's a pleasure meeting you. Thought leader, visionary, game changer. How did all this come about?
Through the school of hard knocks. It came about because I'm a slow learner and I had to I had to take my time doing it. So the quick version of my story is that I was relatively successful. I was an executive at a large consulting firm. I had achieved a PhD, certain amount of, notoriety and all that, but I was really struggling, frankly, mostly with addiction to my own stories, but I also struggled with addiction to substances, in my case, alcohol, and had to really kind of reboot my life. And for people who say, well, it's too late for me, it's too late to start over, I can tell them my own story, which is I restarted my life at 55 and have had a really amazing trajectory over the last 5 years, largely because I've been willing to own my own story, because I've been willing to inspire others, because I sometimes call the people around me my life team. I've created a life team around me, people who are willing to support me, love me, believe in me, because I'm reciprocating it. I'm giving it back to them.
That's amazing because a lot of times people don't that are successful, all they want to do is talk about their success. And what happens is most of us are struggling, trying to get to success. And when we get to success, we struggle so long we don't know how to handle it. And we normally blow up. And we start back over. It's a forced rewind, if I would say. It's not a chosen rewind. It's one of those rewinds that just happens because you weren't prepared to be successful. In my little small world, I always ask people, um, "Are you prepared to be successful?" And a lot of people say yes, but they don't actually know what success is. And a lot of times, success is not the reflection of our bank account or how many cars we own or how many vacations we're able to take. And you just summed it up with the surrounding of the people that create great life experiences for you. And
Mhm.
when I was looking at your bio, I'm going, how do I tell an original story? I don't know if how much Corey has told you about me.
Not much. So I would love to hear that. Yeah, please.
Well,
Tell me.
I have what I call a very unique style. It's called backyard conversation. I just had a marketing company contact me and ask me, how was I able to cross over? And I go, I'm not for sure. I'm not exactly following what do you mean to cross over? She goes, you are a Black podcaster and you have a mixed following. And I'm going, I'm a Black podcaster? I did not know that. I'm going, thank you, thank you, thank you for pointing that out.
Right.
And I told her, I said, now I gotta hide because there's a system that works against me.
Right.
Um, so I said my biggest issue is, um, and my goal is that I didn't set up my podcast in order to get rich. I already live a very comfortable life, and I've been ups and downs. My addiction happens to be, some other things, working out. I chose not to use alcohol because I grew up with a father that had a relationship that was closer to the bottle than his responsibilities were to his family, and that's where I put it. Um, and I decided that if I'm going to have any addiction, they had to be addictions that made life better for other people. So I entered this space of a fitness world. My style that we use is more conversational. We call it backyard conversation. It's the type of conversation you and I are having right now. If we were at a social event and we just happened to be sitting in the corner, kind of watching the festivities, and you and I just struck up a unique conversation about life itself and our perspectives and our view of life, and we happen to share these stories. I always say, and I told this to Corey, which if you look at Corey's interview, I thought of 50 different reasons to try to get Corey not to promote his book on my podcast. And Corey is an expert of promoting himself. And then I finally got him.
Right.
As soon as he exhaled, I got him. And I asked him a question that I knew he didn't have an answer for.
Right.
And so I always say that anything that can be Googled, um, by you when we search your name, is not a conversation I want to have. I want to speak directly to my audience. I want to showcase people with stories that we should know, people that are neighbors, people are that we work alongside, people that we will sit by Starbucks and strike up a regular conversation, and especially have a conversation that's going to make a difference. This time of year is hard for men. Suicide rate goes up. Men's mental health
Yes.
is sky high. We don't identify
Mhm.
taking care of ourselves, and we don't communicate with people on the level that we have, and we don't listen when people are trying to communicate and tell us they are struggling. And that's the reason why, we find ourselves in a car in our garage reading a book, which I had at one time in my life, um, trying to take the easy way out until I realized that, after talking to one of my sons and my daughters, and realized that someone loved me, and that I know how pissed off I was when my father died prematurely. I didn't want my kids to have to live with that over their head. And I said, I tell people all the time, every storm there's a calm afterwards, and we get in a panic mode when it starts to get too cold, too hot, and realize that there is a better answer. We just got to wait it out. And so by listening to what you just said, the first question I had is, how do I create a story of and tell a story that's going to help someone else and still tell your story at the same time? And you set it up very well.
Thank you. Thank you. And I wonder too, Kevin, like what I've been struck by lately is so many of these things that we aspire to live into, things like authenticity and vulnerability, like being real with people. Um, Oftentimes it's skills that we haven't been taught. Like if I want to learn how to do accounting, I can go to the community college, I can sign up for a course online from QuickBooks or so on. But if I want to learn to be vulnerable, if I want to learn to build authentic relationships with other people, we don't have a ton of places to do that. So I'm really grateful that your podcast and your audience is looking for just real conversations, real stories, real people. To me, that is the great hope for the future of our planet is not some grand design, some grand plan. It's in conversations. It's in learning how to. I focus a lot on interdependence, like how do we help each other succeed? To me, that's the great hope, and so I'm grateful that you're doing that.
Well, I am grateful that Corey referred me to you. And I'm a firm believer that we are energy. And I think the energy from the planet is connecting the right people to the right people. The same way the energy from the planet is connecting the wrong people to each other. They're starting to gather together and to show who they are and what they're about. And it's one of those things that I believe. I don't think we should wait to see what happens. I think we should be prepared for what's going to happen and not be surprised and come up with a better plan that's going to unify the people that are ready to be unified. I don't think everyone's ready to work together, but the group
I
of
agree.
people that's open, I think we
Mhm.
need to come together. And that's the reason why, even though I say that this podcast um, will never be one of those ones that's going to be at the top of the list of podcasts because I don't do controversy, but it will be one of those podcasts that when you're sitting alone and you start to hear the stories and whatever, you will get hooked on the stories because I'm talking to you, and that's my listener.
I love that. I love that. And I would love to be a part of that. One thing that I realized I can send you, I actually have a sort of a media sheet, which I probably should have sent you earlier, but it's got some of the topics I normally talk about. But again, to your point, I would really welcome the opportunity to just come and share my story however you think it can be best shared to your audience, like
Well,
what things
th-
you're
this
interested in.
this is what I'm going to do. I want to expand on this story, this conversation we're having, and I want to duplicate this story. But I also want to going to ask you, what's the one interview that you've always wanted to have that you never get a chance to have? That's the interview that I want to talk about. And the reason why I say this because I told Corey this. Um, every single time I've given a public speech, I sit down and I write a world-class speech. And then I start thinking about who's going to listen, whose life can I change or whatever. And all of a sudden, here I go again. I'm rewriting this because of this person's going to be there and that person's going to be there. And I said, it's funny. Ultimately end up writing and training myself to do a speech. And then because of conversations I may have in the lobby, I give a speech that's totally different. Um, and I try to modify and stay on the speech that I had planned, but I give a whole different speech. And then afterwards, in social situations and conversation, I give the speech that I should have given when I was up on stage.
Sure. I completely understand that.
Okay. So what
What
I'm
I love to talk about, what would be a real gift to me and hopefully a gift to your listeners as well, would really be to tell the story of how we find the courage to start over. To me, and particularly if we're further along or we've reached certain milestones and we think we've passed our expiration date. One thing I encourage like even my coaching clients to do is, go just open up Google and search for people who started over later in life. And what you'll find is a bunch of 30-year-olds and Colonel Sanders.
Mhm.
There's not a lot of stories of people who have found the hope and the courage to start over. And so I love to tell that story, and what my hope would be, because like you, I think that we are drawn energetically to the people that are supposed to hear our story. And what I would love and what I imagine is that when you and I talk and share these thoughts on your podcast, that there are people out there who are going to be significant to the future. One of the phrases that's been really important to me lately, or one of the questions is, how can I be a better ancestor? I borrowed it from a book by Ari Wallach called Long Path, and it's kind of like realizing that somewhere 100 years from now will be my multiple great grandchildren. There'll be a whole other part of our species will be around 100 years from now. What will I have done, and what will the people who have listened to my story have done and created that will make that future better, brighter, more hopeful? And so I love your question, because oftentimes I go on podcasts and people want to know maybe kind of like how do I kind of things. And I'm certainly more than qualified to talk about those kinds of questions, but like, how can I imagine a bigger future? How can I imagine myself part of the energy that is shaping the future of humanity? That's stuff I love to talk about.
All right, we will definitely talk about that. We won't talk about the 10 steps on how to do this and whatever. And the reason why I'm going to say that is that, my grandfather, and, this was 100 years ago.
Sure.
I hear everyone talk about 10X and so forth, but this is me as an 8-year-old child having this conversation. And I'm going to be very frank with you, because it's just different conversation coming from a Black household than it does any other household. My grandfather said, and I will probably say this on air because I've never said it, because I was always concerned how people are going to interpret it. I grew up in a biracial family, and my grandfather said to me, in order for me to compete on the same level of anyone of a different skin color than me, I had to be 3 times better. And as an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, I don't remember what time, I know I was in the third grade, I told my grandfather, and I was a smartass. I said, Grandpa, I am going to be 10 times better than anybody else, because the world's going to have to compete against me.
Right.
That has been my mantra for my whole life. I will outwork anyone else. And so when I look at the fact that the first book that I read was Think and Grow Rich. The second
Mm.
book was How to Win Friends and Influence People. I went to a Napoleon Hill speaker seminar and sat there in the eighth grade and goes, "Oh, I do that. Oh, that's the way I think," or whatever. And I'm going, I could do
I
this.
love
I
it.
can do it. Anything's possible. But the one thing I realized, if Think and Grow Rich, and I finally peeled back the layers recently, if Think and Grow Rich was what people perceive it to be and the reason why people bought it, there'd be a lot more rich people in there. And when you listen to the phrasing and reread the book in current state as a mature mind, rich doesn't come with the value of your position in your job or your bank account or your status in your neighborhood. Your true wealth is through your relationships and experiences with people.
Mhm.
That's where
Absolutely.
richness comes in.
Absolutely. Agree. 100%.
Yeah. So I am going to send you a guest setup link
Okay.
to invite you on the show. Fill it out. Um, I'll ask you suggestions on show titles and what you think. But I want to have the conversation. I want to get the chance to know you. I'm going to peel back the layers. But because we're going into holidays and because of men's mental health and talking about success, most people, I know very few 40-year-old men that have reached success. Um, but I do know 3 40-year-old men that are killing it as far as success, but they've just started to have a family and a life and whatever. And that success is going to be redefined when they realize that their children have needs and demands of them. The wife's needs and demands are going to be on a constant reset button, depends on her moods and her life at that point. And then the values of what you value today are going to be redefined, reshaped, and revisited several times. And you're going to question, am I doing things right? Or am I doing everything wrong? And then all of a sudden you're going to settle in and say, what's really important to me? And before you know it, you're going to be 50 years of age and you're going to start living your life.
Agreed. Absolutely.
Yeah. I cannot wait to sit down and have this conversation because believe it or not,
Same.
I'm gonna sit in the chair opposite you and pretend to be smart.
I don't think that's going to be much of a pretense, but yes, I love it. And anytime, I get the chance to have a backyard conversation, anytime we're telling stories, and not trying to give people more data or more facts, but we're telling our stories. I think stories are what hold us together. And in many ways, when I look at the struggles in the world, it's a failure of story. Like I don't have a story that inspires me. I mean, I do, but I think oftentimes too many people in our world are uninspired because they haven't really been told a story that helps them imagine a brighter future. So I would love to come
And
on.
those stories are going to be hard to come by because they are no longer going to be organic stories. They're going to be computer generated stories in order just to sensationalize the story that should have been told. And it is not going to have the same emotion, which men are disconnected from because we're not taught to be emotional creatures. It is not going to have the same impact. It's because it's going to be so generic that no one really cares.
Right. Yeah.
All right. And people don't realize AI is going to disconnect us for several years of the human experience because we're going to go back into that finite mindset and realize that before it all crashes and burns, that the infinite mindset is we should be living. And by that time, we're going to be dealing with our own Will Smith version of AI and trying to fight the computers.
I agree. I agree. And so we're in for some interesting times ahead.
Yeah. So I want to thank you for taking this time. I don't, the icebreaker is just so that when you and I finally get on air, we're not strangers. We're more so friends than anything else. And I hear that you have a wonderful podcast, so I'll start listening to your podcast. But I can't wait to introduce you to my audience. I can't wait to meet your audience, and I can't wait to share your story with the rest of the world.
Amazing. Thank you, Kevin. We'll talk soon.
All right, I look forward to it. I record every Monday at 12, 2, and 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I think you're in Virginia someplace, right?
I'm in North Carolina.
Okay, so we're at the same time zone.
Absolutely.
All right, so I will send you that link. Fill it out as soon as possible. I want to get you on as soon as possible. Um, I'm 6 months um, booked in my schedule, but I'm going to move someone around because I'd like to get you on before my birthday. My birthday is December 10th. So within the
Okay.
next 2 weeks,
But
I'd like to tell your story because I think my gut feeling is that um, not only will we save some lives, we will set up someone's new year to be realistic instead of writing down in these journals things that really can't happen. All
I
right.
look forward to it.
All right. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Kevin. We'll talk soon. Bye.
All right. Bye bye, Will.